Victoria's multicultural community has come under fire over the last couple of weeks, especially during the lockdowns over the COVID pandemic. I decided to reach out to the chair of the Ethnic Communities Council of Victoria. His name is Eddie Micallef. Eddie, welcome to The Informer.
Thank you, George.
Now, give us an idea about the council. Who do you represent in your dealings throughout the year?
Well, the Ethnic Communities Council of Victoria is a peak organisation that represents 220 ethno-specific organisations who are affiliated to the council of Victoria, plus 8 regions. So we probably represent in the vicinity of around 20 to 40,000 people, depending on how many of those members those specific organisations have on their books.
How did the council feel on the Monday after that incredible weekend where we saw the state government impose a lockdown almost overnight that badly affected the residents, nearly 3,000 of them, that were housed in those towers in Flemington and North Melbourne?
Well, we felt a number of things. We felt, George, was the first fact that we weren't consulted to advise the authorities, both the police, the Department of Health, emergency services and other organisations, on what we feel is the appropriate way to approach those residents within those towers, the 3,000 residents you spoke of. Rather than sending in police cars and uniforms, flashing lights, and it was almost like an emergency situation that they didn't understand. And so they responded in a way, they were frightened, they were anxious, all those sorts of things added to the stress that they're all living by within the COVID-19 situation overall, with the limitations.
Now Eddie, we're talking about vulnerable people who are, many of them in the service industries. They absolutely have to go to work to make a living. No one's giving them a handout. And the other thing that fascinates me is we've been hearing and we've interviewed a number of social workers and community leaders, and they said to us that they spoke to government nearly 3 months earlier, and they were warning government that they needed assistance, they needed help, they needed access to more sanitisers, they needed a more regimented cleaning program. What happened? Look, why wasn't one, government listening? Why wasn't the health department listening? And why wasn't the minister listening?
Well, that's a good question, and I think I can't answer on their behalf, George, to say that I'm disappointed, given that I personally have a background in occupational health and community health, and to me that was the logical way to go about it, is to introduce a system of protective mechanisms and protective strategies that could mitigate against the virus becoming out of hand within those towers. And as it's been told, they're virtually a vertical cruise ship. And once the virus gets into those towers, it's very difficult to contain.
Why did we see only those towers in North Melbourne and Flemington being the ones addressed? Why didn't we look at all the towers? Because as you touched on, they're all vertical cruise ships. Why don't we close them all down?
Well, I think in the first instance, the government was probably responding to the data they had that the virus outbreak was within the Flemington and North Melbourne towers first up. But I think that should have indicated if the virus is running amok there, that it should be the other towers should be looked at in a more preventative way rather than waiting for an outbreak to happen elsewhere.
What did you make of the media's response and the way they handled the lockdown?
Well, I think the lockdown was handled in a very stressful way, if I can be kind, and if I want to be very critical, I say in a very unprofessional way, in the sense of you're sending police cars with blue lights flashing in to introduce a lockdown to people who are very vulnerable, speak many different languages, adhere to many different cultures, and have low health literacy and sometimes low literacy in their own languages was just a recipe for disaster.
40 years ago or thereabouts, we created a voice for the people of the multicultural communities, and it was dubbed the Special Broadcasting Service, the SBS. Why isn't it addressing these challenges? Why hasn't it done a better job at breaking down some of those discriminatory attitudes that we've been hearing? Why are we so quick, as they say, to point a finger? I would have thought that this multicultural broadcaster, if it had really been addressing its charter, it would have been answering all of these concerns for the better part of the last 20 years.
George, I've been working with SBS and our federal body, FECA, who the ethnic communities, the state bodies are affiliated to, and SBS does translations in 67 languages.
On radio?
And they 67 languages.
On radio? Translate. But what about TV?
On radio.
But what about TV? It's TV arm.
I can't answer for that, but radio, look, in many cases, radio is a very effective format for getting to those vulnerable communities, because often they listen to the radio. I mean, SBS television should have been used more effectively. I accept that, but radio was used very well, and maybe, I don't know whether it's resources. I think the federal government has stepped in and upped the resourcing to SBS to improve that position that you're saying that should have happened.
Look, the mark I'm trying to make is that I understand the point you make about radio. There's no doubt about that. It is readily accessible, and those ethnic communities do listen very carefully. But the television arm for the better part of the last 40 years has morphed into a niche and fabulous multicultural broadcaster. The only problem is the only people it's not catering to are the multicultural communities it was designed for.
Well, I'll put it another way, George. I think they've done a fair bit, but they could do a lot more. I'll put it in that sense, and I'll say that about governments, both state and federal as well. I mean, hindsight's a great learner, great teacher, as you're well aware.
Yep.
So I think we should pick it up, and we should lift our game as we go along.
Bravo. Thanks very much, Eddie, for joining us and for being, as they say, brave enough and courageous enough to tell us that we have made some mistakes at a bundle of different levels, but we need to attend to it right now. And
the Ethnic Communities Council, I'm meeting today with the Minister for Multicultural Affairs in Victoria, Rod Spence. We meet on a weekly basis with the VMC, the Victorian Multicultural Commission. But it would have been nice for them the government and the Commission, to have a more effective communication, especially before the tower situation broke out.
100%. Thank you very much, Eddie.
Pleasure.